So how does HMB compare to other supplements for muscle growth? Now, for those of you who are like, HMB, what is that? Well, it's hydroxymethylbutyrate. And it's just easier to say HMB for obvious reasons, but hydroxymethylbutyrate, this is a ketone. And it's a ketone that is so wildly effective for muscle growth. And I'm going to show you in this video just how you can stack it with creatine, or you can stack it with peptides and amplify your body's ability to grow muscle, to recover. And it does happen to be really good for the brain. So let's jump in. So where do you find HMB, or what are you even talking about, Regan? Well, HMB is actually broken down in your liver. And these ketones, specifically if you're thinking of using exogenous ketones, so ketones that come from outside of your body, there is phenomenal research that a couple of my friends and clients have actually put together, and they've had the most robust ketone company on the planet. And a lot of these ketones, we're finding that they work really well in sports drinks. We find they work really well with protein shakes. And those of you who are clients, and you've seen me send you that liquid bottle of the immune ketones, and you'll see the 5 ketone immune formula, that is ketones. And that is what HMB, hydroxymethylbutyrate. And the methylated group is really important because it allows your body to utilize it better. So if you think of ketones, and you think of carbohydrates, your body gets fuel from 2 primary sources. It gets fuel from glucose or sugars, which are technically in the carbohydrate department, or you get energy from what are called ketones from fat metabolism. So hydroxymethylbutyrate is actually one of the fatty acids that gets salvaged and then it gets processed in your liver and becomes ketones. And the ketones are so critical for having metabolic flexibility because a lot of us, we just focus on getting our energy from the easiest place, which is glucose. So it's kind of the difference between an electrical car and a gas-fed car. So if you think of the electrical engine, I've had a Tesla in the past, and I loved it because I had solar panels on my house. So yes, I was not running a coal-burning car, which a lot of people would tease me about. I was like, no, I'm getting energy from the sun, putting it right into my car. And so what would happen is with the Tesla, it's just nice, smooth energy. I now have a TRX, this Dodge big old truck, and it gets like 10 miles to the gallon. Really fuel efficient, right? Well, that's like carbohydrates. And I have to go and stop and fill my truck up with gas. Whereas with the Tesla, it felt like I always had this smooth energy that's available all the time. So your body can be the same way. And if you think of when you have access to ketones, you're going to not only feel cleaner metabolically, you'll be able to fast for longer if you need to miss a meal, and you're not going to have these energy crashes. But the biggest thing is once you go into more of a ketogenic state, then it's a way that you turn off that replication of cancerous cells. So if you're in a muscle building stage, you want to always trigger autophagy. So you want to be exercising a lot, and you want to clear out those cells that could go rogue on us and cause cancer or disease. But what we found with some of the ketones is that they can actually turn off that process and help you maintain the lean muscle that you want to build and actually help accelerate it, especially when combined with creatine. So why would you want to use hydroxymethylbutyrate with creatine? Well, one of the things that methyl hydroxybutyrate does is it activates more ATP production. And when you combine that with creatine, what creatine does is it stimulates the proteostasis or activates the denaturing of protein and allows you to put on healthy muscle mass. Creatine also helps allow your muscles to have better hydration, and it also is really good for activating ATP production in the brain, as does the methyl hydroxybutyrate. And so it's so fascinating because when you start stacking these substances, what you'll notice is your energy stays cleaner for longer. And in fact, in one of the studies they found with using the HMB or the hydroxymethylbutyrate, using ketones, I'll just use ketones as a broad brushstroke, but by using ketones with creatine, what people notice is that they have better endurance when it comes to like our triathlons. And we also find that our cyclists who use ketones, they're able to trigger that fat burning efficiency, just like that Tesla. It's smooth energy that's very clean. And they can access that faster. So how do you know if you need ketones? Well, one of the tests we run is called an organic acids test or metabolomics. And what this does is it's urine metabolites that actually shows you how well your body utilizes fats, how well your body utilizes proteins, and how well it utilizes carbohydrates. And in about 65% of the tests that we've ran in our clinic, what we find is that you are not producing the level of ketones that your body requires for ATP production. Because what's at the end of this pathway is called the electron transport chain. And so if you have all the raw materials to activate the movement of the electron transport chain, then at the other end of it, you're activating mitochondria. And so for better mitochondrial expression, when we put people on ketones, exogenous ketones, we put them on it for the course of about 3 months, and then we retest. And what we find is their levels of using ketones for an energy source dramatically improves, in some cases by over 100%. But not only that, subjectively, we find when we do the brain scan, we find that the brain has a lot more adaptability. The power output of the brain, we actually saw one client that was hovering around 500, and just to give you perspective, you want your power output to be 2,500 to 4,500. And so he was only utilizing a small percentage of his brain, but just by adding in the hydroxymethylbutyrate, he was able to accelerate his progress. And so these ketones, they can be really nice, especially when you wake up in the morning and you want to continue on getting that 12-hour fasted state. Maybe some of you are going 16 hours, but you don't want the hunger and you need the energy. Well, you can do ketones right before a workout, and you'll notice that it's hydrating because of the salts in the ketones, but you'll also notice that you feel better from a muscular perspective because these ketones allow your muscles to stay hydrated, especially when you stack it with creatine. And so for those of you who are like, well, I don't know if I need this. Well, when you combine that with the creatine, what you'll notice is better ATP production. And then what I notice, if I add in a little 5-amino-1-MQ, or I'll do an injection of NAD, or I'll do a nasal spray called neuro-NAD, that NAD just accelerates the movement on the electron transport chain and generates more and more energy. And what I really like to do as well is add in methylene blue. So I just threw a lot of things in there, but just think of this hydroxymethylbutyrate, think of creatine as a muscle building agent. And then you want to build more muscle where you need to push hypertrophy. You want to go until you got that last rep where you're really struggling and you're pushing through it. And that's really where we get the growth, is through discomfort. Sounds a lot like life, right? But when you add in the methylene blue, you clean up the electron transport chain. You also have the side benefit of having green urine or blue urine, which is kind of a fun joke to play on people. But then you have NAD, and if you're using 5-amino-1-MQ, for example, your body's going to produce more NAD naturally. You can even take an herb called cordyceps to do some of the same thing. But then when you're working out, you can go just a little harder, a little stronger. My endurance athletes who are in competitive events, they just find that it changes everything because mentally they can stay in the game because they're continually producing energy, and they can go from using glucose to ketones, and they can move back and forth in this metabolic adaptation. So for those of you who say, wow, I love this, I want to learn what's going to be best for my body, well, all you need to do is get your blood work ran or do your metabolomics test. And we can help you with that. You go to agelessfuture.com. So what some of the science shows is that creatine has decades of research. It's been researched more heavily than any other supplement. And there's over 500 peer-reviewed studies. And what they found that it's not only great for muscle growth, but it helps with brain health. It reverses aging, and it's one of the best supplements you can take when it comes to recovery. Whereas if you look at the hydroxymethylbutyrate, you can go to Ketone Labs and you can find out all of these studies, but it does have a narrower therapeutic window, and it's an anti-catabolic aid. So what that means is it protects your muscles from being broken down, because if your body runs out of glucose, guess what your body goes after? That's right, it starts metabolizing muscles in your body, and it breaks down those proteins and converts them to sugar. So yes, protein does get converted into sugar, fat does not. And so when you have adequate levels of ketones, you're going to avoid that muscle wasting that can come for those of you who push yourself really hard in your sports. And so the International Society of Sports Nutrition, they declared creatine as the most effective nutritional supplement currently available to athletes. So when you combine that with ketones, let me know how you feel, because I notice I feel so much better when I have those two combined, not only on my mountain biking, but in my running, weightlifting, everything. And so for those of you who want to learn more about creatine, I have a whole video that I've provided in the show notes below. Check out my video on exactly how to use creatine, how to dose it, and I'll see you there.